Charles do Bronx Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush goes down this Saturday. UFC 289 co-main event, Vancouver, Canada. I cannot wait for this fight, and I'm here to give y'all my breakdown and prediction for this matchup. You got Beneil Dariush rising up the rankings. He's in the top 5, 7-fight win streak, I believe, or 8-fight win streak. Finally getting the respect he deserves. People are finally starting to recognize Dariush. You know, originally he was that dark horse that no one was talking about. No one wanted to fight. Now this guy, he's getting the respect he deserves. But now you got Oliveira, the former champion, who a lot of people are now writing off because of that Islam Makhachev loss. The roles are now reversed between these two. And Beneil Dariush is favored to win. A lot of people are picking Beneil Dariush, and I can see why. This is a very hard fight for Oliveira. And I've been saying for 2 years now that this matchup stylistically is very, very competitive. This has been my dream matchup since both guys fought and won at UFC 262, but the stars just did not align for both men to fight. But now here it is. Oliveira coming off a title loss. The number one contender looking to bounce back, defend his number one spot versus the rising contender, but is also a veteran who's finally looking to make his way to a title shot, looking to make a name off Charles do Bronx Oliveira, looking to take that number one spot. And I believe that Beneil Dariush can win. I do believe that he will get his title shot at Islam in Abu Dhabi. But does he get past do Bronx is the question of the day. Will he get through Charles Oliveira and become the number one contender? Well, let's talk about this matchup. So both guys on paper are very similar in their style. A little bit different in how they fight and what they do, but they're very, very, very much the same. They're very much identical in terms of both guys being extremely well-rounded, dangerous in the stand-up, good strikers with heavy hands, but also dangerous on the ground with their jiu-jitsu. Both guys have good wrestling, but I would say Beneil Dariush's wrestling is above Oliveira's, a step ahead, better than his. But I'd say Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is better than Beneil's, and his jiu-jitsu is more dangerous from bottom than Dariush. Dariush is better at defending takedowns than Charles Oliveira. And I think in terms of power, they're even. Striking, I'd say Oliveira is a little bit better. I think he's more technical than Beneil. He's faster than Beneil. He's got a lot more of a wider variety than Beneil Dariush. He's better in terms of his kicks, his elbows, his knees. He's got really good, effective Muay Thai. I think his boxing is all around more technical. Overall, he's got the Muay Thai kickboxing advantage over Beneil Dariush. So if it were to come down to just a pure striking match, I'd say Charles Oliveira would have the edge. However, there is one issue with Oliveira is he's very wild and he's very open and he gets hurt every fight and his defense is very poor. And I believe that does get him in trouble in a lot of fights, and that's what got him in trouble against Islam. And Beneil Dariush, even though his stand-up isn't as good, his stand-up is a lot more composed. It's a lot more measured. He's more patient. He looks to seize the openings better. You know what I mean? Whereas Oliveira, he looks to force the openings, which sometimes works for him because he can create a wild exchange. He can catch you in that wild exchange. He can get you to panic and make a mistake in that wild, chaotic exchange. But also it can get him in trouble, like we saw against Islam. Islam dropped him and he was not able to get up and recover. And Islam was able to finish him on the ground because Islam's ground game is on par with Charles Oliveira, and that's the danger of this matchup. Beneil has composed striking and he can handle Oliveira on the ground. This is not like one of those strikers that Oliveira fights that's afraid to go to the ground with him. Beneil Dariush will not be afraid to go to the ground with Charles if he hurts him. So do Bronx has to be very careful in the stand-up against Beneil Dariush because Beneil, like I said, he's measured, he's composed, and with that composure, it can allow him to find an opening on the feet. He can time a big counter shot that could hurt Charles Oliveira. And if he does hurt Oliveira, I believe, like Makhachev, he can find that finish. Because he will be willing to go to the ground with Do Bronx, and then he can work his way to a submission. So Charles Oliveira, to win this fight, ultimately, he'd really need to adjust his style from his usual wild style, because it might get him in trouble against Beneil Dariush. Beneil has a devastating counter left hand. We saw him drop Mateo Scamrot with that. So Oliveira really has to watch out. I know Oliveira's got a dangerous right hand, and he can potentially land that on Beneil. He could hurt Beneil. Both guys have potential to hurt each other, but with the composure of Beneil, I believe it can allow Beneil to find the openings better and to land first on Oliveira and hurt Oliveira before Oliveira can hurt him. So ultimately, this matchup is going to come down to, how does Charles Oliveira approach this fight? Will he show that he's learned his lessons from the Makhachev fight, or will he go out there with his usual style? His usual style could potentially work on Beneil, but it's such a risky gamble, especially with the momentum advantage that Beneil Dariush has. Beneil has momentum and confidence. He's the guy on the winning streak, and he's fighting a guy coming off a loss who's been pretty much exposed. Like, Islam wrote the blueprint that I believe Beneil Dariush has studied deeply, and he's going to very much look to capitalize on. So in terms of that, I think Dariush does have the edge over Charles Do Bronx Oliveira. Oliveira has to fight smart against Beneil Dariush, because this is a very, very dangerous fight. However, a lot of people that are writing off Charles Oliveira, they are forgetting who this man is and what he has done. You know, this Islam loss does not define who Charles Oliveira is. He can very well win this fight. Both guys are capable of winning this fight. Both guys are capable of finishing this fight as well at any given moment. If Oliveira connects, it could be over. If Beneil connects, it could be over. Oliveira could potentially find a finish on the ground via submission, and Beneil Dariush could even do the same thing. Now, in terms of the grappling, now that we've talked about the stand-up, in terms of the grappling, how is Beneil going to approach this fight? Will he go out there and try to fight him the way he fought Tony Ferguson? It's very possible. However, I think Oliveira is better at defending takedowns than El Cucuy. I think he's a lot more physically stronger than El Cucuy. So I think if Oliveira so chooses, I believe he can defend takedowns from Beneil Dariush. He can make it a lot harder for Dariush to go out there and impose his wrestling, because Beneil doesn't have that dominant wrestling style that Makhachev does. And also, a majority of the times that Oliveira did end up on his back was through him pulling guard or getting dropped. So we'll see how much Oliveira chooses to pull guard. But then even if this fight does touch the mat, Oliveira is a lot more effective from bottom than Tony Ferguson. So I also believe there's going to be more danger there. Now, if Charles chooses to go for takedowns in this fight, I also believe he might struggle more so than Beneil would struggle to get him down, because Beneil has very good takedown defense. I think he can defend takedowns of Charles Oliveira relatively easily too. So ultimately, I do think the grappling will cancel each other out, and it's going to mainly be a kickboxing match just due to Beneil's takedown defense and Oliveira's high-level jiu-jitsu game and ability to counter takedowns with guillotines. It's just too risky. It's going to be too difficult for both guys to impose their grappling in this fight. So it will mainly be a striking match with a few takedown attempts here and there, where Oliveira might go for the body lock in the clinch and try to transition over to the back like he did to Dustin, and then Beneil fighting that off, and then Beneil shooting for some takedowns of his own, but Oliveira doing good, staying upright. So then how will this fight play out if it just comes down to the striking? Based off everything I just said initially, it's just going to come down to Oliveira's strategy pretty much. Because I do think Oliveira in the stand-up, like I said, he's got the technical advantage. He's got a wider variety advantage. So it's all on Oliveira. He just cannot fight like a dumbass. Oliveira has to stay behind his teep kicks to keep Beneil at range. and use a lot of leg kicks, which his leg kicks are very effective. And he should also use the clinch, the Muay Thai clinch, and break Beneil down with knees to the body like he did to Dustin Poirier, which he very well can do. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight is going to be, I am going to lean the way of Charles Oliveira. I think he's going to chop down the legs of Beneil Dariush. And then Beneil's going to have a tough time sitting down on those punches. And I think he's going to use a lot of teep kicks to the body to try and slow Beneil down. I see Oliveira initiating the clinch a lot, landing a lot of knees from the inside to slow Beneil down, to take some wind out of him. But I do think it's going to be a very, very close fight. Both guys cancel each other out in a lot of ways. But I think Oliveira, I think he's going to fight with a smart game plan in this one. I'm going to trust him, and I say he's going to win a close decision. I mean, either man can get a finish, but with Oliveira coming off that loss, I don't see him taking chances that are going to get him in trouble. And Beneil Dariush is very tough, very hard to put away. Oliveira could knock him out, but I'm going to say Beneil can take the shots. And I'm going to say Beneil also won't fall into submission, so I'm going to say Oliveira wins a striking match and has some control time against the cage and lands some good shots in the clinch. Wins this fight 29-28, probably like maybe a split decision, but we'll see. But I want to know your predictions in the comment section down below. Who do you guys have winning? Charles do Bronx Oliveira or Beneil Dariush? Like and subscribe, and peace out.